question for you. Over the last months, how many days have you wished that you could just stay under the covers in the morning? Yell out a number. 30. 30? And this month, who has asked themselves the question, why am I so tired? What's wrong with me? Yeah? Anyone? So each December, I go through the same thing. I start getting more tired. I feel stiff. I'm less enthusiastic about starting new things, which for my husband may be a good thing. Maybe even for some of you. Where's Dave Schimmel? And every year, I panic just a little, and I think, oh no, there's something wrong with me. Why am I like this? Why am I tired? What's wrong? And I run out and I buy green drink mixes. And I pull out the multivitamins and I scroll through the latest Instagram exercise videos as if I was going to do any of them anyway. And then each year, somewhere amongst the rush to fix myself, I remember there is nothing wrong with me. In fact, my tiredness, my desire to pull inward, my feeling like I wish life would stop for a while, is a sign that there is something very right with me. It is a sign that I am part of this natural world, a world that ebbs and flows and has a season for every purpose. The wrong part is me pretending that everything should stay the same all year round and that I should operate in the same way 12 months a year. The wrong part is thinking that my productivity is supposed to grow month over month like some Fortune 500 business plan. You can say amen once in a while. The wrong part is me forgetting to listen to the wisdom of nature. The birds and squirrels, the deer, the bear, all know that to act the same in December as we did in June would be folly. How many people in the fall, as you watch the trees drop their leaves and pull their energy into their roots, shout at them, "Hey, trees, stop being so lazy. Come on now, buddy. Stay focused. Wake up. Make some more leaves." Do you do that? And yet we often do that to ourselves, don't we? Right? Come on, what's wrong with you? Keep going. We demand that we focus, not rest. Now, while I'm the last one to suggest that winter breaks to warmer climates are not a good thing, especially for those of us that live up north, I do wonder if we too often miss this seasonal opportunity to slow down and pull our focus inward. I can definitely blame our culture for our avoidance of the slowdown, but I also think our avoidance is not just a need for less productivity, but can stem from a fear of what we will encounter when we do make our way in the dark. Celtic poet and philosopher John O'Donohue has written some beautiful things about the darkness. He says, "Though you live and work in the light, you were conceived and shaped in darkness." Darkness is one of our closest companions. Something within us knows the darkness more deeply than it knows the light. I love that image of being shaped in the darkness. For me, that speaks to not just the physical darkness of our pre-birth womb time, but the darkness of our interior worlds. The parts of our lives that are not constantly exposed to the light of day. We are conceived and shaped by that darkness. For me, the winter is a time to remember that though so much of our life happens out here in the space between us, we also have an inner world that calls us to tend to it just as the roots of the tree call it to retreat into them. O'Donohue continues by saying, "In darkness, faces are released from the prison of shape and the burden of exposure. Each thing," he says, "creeps back into its own nature within the shelter of the dark. Darkness is the ancient womb. In darkness, the struggle for identity and impression falls away. Again, I love this man's imagery. Isn't it beautiful? Think about this. Faces are released from the prison of shape, and here's the good part, from the burden of exposure. Right? He is saying that our identity, that which we show up in the world as, it needs a rest from the constant exposure to the external. So what happens in the dark when identity and impression fall away? In the Tibetan tradition, there's a story about the great cave-dwelling yogi, Milarepa. It speaks to this tender path of facing what may be in the dark caves of our inner world. It goes like this. One day, Milarepa left his cave to wander around in the world for a while, and when he returned, he found that his cave had been taken over by demons. There were demons everywhere, and his first thought upon seeing them was, I gotta get rid of these. So he lunged toward them, he chased them around, he tried to forcefully get them out of his cave. But the demons were completely unfazed. In fact, the more he chased them around, the more comfortable and settled in they seemed to become. Realizing his efforts to run them out had failed miserably, Milarepa opted for a new approach and decided to teach them about the Dharma, the way, the deep spiritual teachings. If chasing them out wouldn't work, then hearing the teachings might change their mind and they might go. So he takes his seat and he begins to teach them about existence and non-existence. He teaches them about compassion and kindness, the nature of impermanence. He thought he was really teaching beautifully, and after a while he looks up and he realizes that the demons are still there. And they simply stare at him with their huge bulging eyes. Not a single one is leaving. And at this point, Milarepa lets out a deep breath of surrender, knowing that these demons will not be manipulated into leaving and that maybe he has something to learn from them. So he looks deeply in their eyes of each demon and he bows and he says, it looks like we're going to be here together for some time. All right, I open myself up to whatever it is you have to teach me. And in that moment, the demons disappear. All but one. The biggest, most fiercest, hugest-eyed one with flaring nostrils and dripping fangs is still there. So Milarepa takes another breath. And he lets go even further. And stepping over to that largest demon, he offers himself up completely. And he just says, eat me if you wish. And he places his head in the demon's mouth. And at that moment, the largest demon bows his head and disappears. Now, while there's probably many interpretations of this story, I see the cave as representative of our inner worlds. And the demons in the story are all that is in our life that is too painful to live in the light outside of that cave. They are the things we would rather not face and can more easily avoid when there's lots of light on. Or at least we tell ourselves they're easier to avoid in the daylight. It is only by giving ourselves the time to enter the darkness and face these demons that we can hope to see what they really are. And only then do they have the potential to be released from the prisons of our psyches that hold them there. I love how Milarepa starts off doing what most of us do when we encounter our demons, right? We fight them back, right? We try to bat them away. Why we think this will work is beyond me. It's a comedy of errors, but we give it the old college try, right? We see something in ourselves that we don't like, and we just try to push it away. I relate most to the part in the story where Milarepa tries to teach the demons spiritual stuff. Some of us are especially good at that one. We enter the dark cave of our interior worlds, looking to avoid looking at the demons in the eye, and we give them all kinds of sometimes spiritual, sometimes intellectual contortions, stories, conversations, and we think that this is going to convince these demons to just go away. our demons just sit there quietly watching our acrobatics, waiting for us to do the hardest task. That hardest task is simply to look them in the eye, making peace with their existence, making peace with the dark inside of each of us. Do you know what I'm talking about? Am I the only one? There's those moments where you sit in the dark of your own interior space and you feel the weight of those things that are dark inside you right there. And you squirm and you squirm and you try to not be present with them. But then there's that moment where you surrender. Sometimes life makes us surrender, right? Sometimes the things outside reflecting that inside are so big, surrender is all we can do. But in that moment, you surrender and invite all that is in you, all that is in the shadows of your heart to teach you. What does it have to teach you? And this is the tender work of the darkness, the work that winter invites us into. It cannot be done in the bright light of our busy lives, but requires a different kind of light. When we stop trying to push the dark away and instead just light a tiny candle of presence, then we can see that the light has changed the shapes of the things in the dark. Isn't it amazing how if we light these candles in this bright room, we notice them, but if the lights were out and it was dark, that single candle would be noticed even more. And it's occurred to me recently that maybe all this talk about the light returning this time of year isn't just about a little more sun coming or an approaching spring. Perhaps the light we are to celebrate this time of year is not the same light that we find in the summer, in external creations. Perhaps the light that returns in the winter is a light that's always been there all along, but it was too bright in our lives for us to notice it. Perhaps it is an inner light that returns, a light born from an encounter with the deepest part of the darkest places of ourselves. And in that light, we all are born. We all are reborn. And maybe that birth is the true birth story of this season. Have you ever gazed at a newborn? Right. It's mesmerizing, isn't it? It takes you to some deep, quiet place. Here is this tiny little being who just emerged from total darkness. Their entire existence up until that point was in the dark. They spent all that time just encountering themselves, creating themselves. And from that kind of encounter, a light is lit. And we can see it in their eyes, right? The baby's eyes and spirit is so bright. It's fresh. It's undivided, right? It's that wholeness. It's that light that still burns bright. And I think the winter and these days invite us to recreate some of that same experience, some of that same womb experience in our own lives. Today we celebrate the winter solstice, and yes, the days will begin to get longer, but really the coldest days are still ahead of us, right? So what will we do with those days? Don't shortchange yourself from the opportunity of this time of year. Don't tell yourself there's something wrong with you when you want to stay in bed or you feel tired. Perhaps it's just your soul, your inner light calling you to notice it. And please, Unitarian Universalists who love to see change in the world, please do not think this work of encountering the darkness is just busy work to keep us going until the real work begins. Parker Palmer, the great Quaker teacher and activist, reminds us, he says, every great movement for social change has been animated by people that have done serious inner work to fuel their heart. Only by taking the inner life seriously and learning how to access and aim that power that is in us could any of the great movements of change have happened. He asks what makes Rosa Parks or Nelson Mandela is the capacity to take the inner life seriously. And one more, he says, as you muddle through your own version of this darkness, remember that there is an inner light that you and you alone control. Every day, look for some way to show up in your personal, vocational, or public life, whatever life you have. The light that you find in the darkness is the light you may just have been looking for all along. To be sure, just as the crocuses and the daffodils will eventually break through, and the dandelions, they'll all break through the hard ground that encapsulates them now. You too will emerge from the dark explorations that you do in this winter time. You too will be reborn. The wheel of the year will turn again, and when it does, we will celebrate that as well. Here in the darkest night, so much awaits. Let us not miss this gift of nature, and let us remember, even in this dark, the light returns.